Some accidents happen unexpectedly, and later they leave us with deep regret. This is one such story. The movie begins with three people climbing a steep, isolated mountain. A girl named Becky, her husband Den, and their close friend Shiloh. All three were making steady progress toward the top, and Shiloh had moved a bit ahead. They were all excited. They were so close to reaching the summit. Just then, Den reached his hand toward a small cave in the rock wall to steady his balance. But out of nowhere, a bird suddenly flew out of the cave, startling him. He lost his footing and began to fall. Luckily, he was secured with a rope and ended up dangling midair. Shocked, Shiloh and Becky tried to pull him back up, but suddenly the rope snapped. Den fell straight down the rocky cliff, and in front of their eyes, he hit the ground and died instantly. Witnessing this horrific accident shattered Becky completely. A deep part of her soul broke. Her hope, her life partner, everything was gone. A year slowly passed, but Becky still hadn't recovered from the trauma. She became withdrawn, emotionally distant, and was drowning in sadness. She started drinking heavily. Alcohol became the only thing in her life. She even kept Den's ashes close by, unable to let go. Becky's father, James, had never liked Den from the beginning. Seeing his daughter in such a miserable state, he grew deeply concerned. He tried to encourage her to move forward, to rebuild her life. But Becky was so consumed by sorrow, she didn't want to listen. One night, in a moment of hopelessness, just then, her friend Shiloh called. Becky learned that Shiloh was coming to visit her. In truth, it was her father, James, who had reached out to Shiloh and asked her to contact Becky and help her out. Since Den's death, Shiloh hadn't seen Becky once. When Shiloh arrived, she smiled briefly upon seeing Becky, but her joy quickly faded into sadness. She gently asked, "How long will you keep living in Den's memories?" She told Becky it was time to start letting go. Shiloh then shared a special plan she had made to honor Den. They would climb a 2,000-foot high TV tower, and from the top, scatter Den's ashes into the wind. "It'll help bring peace to your heart," Shiloh said. At first, Becky refused, but Shiloh told her, "Sometimes to overcome pain, we need to do something new, something bold. This is your chance to move forward." Since Shiloh was her childhood friend, Becky finally agreed. The next morning, the two packed their gear and set out toward the old tower. During the journey, Becky scrolled through Shiloh's phone and came across an old photo. In the picture, there was a guy's hand on Shiloh's shoulder. When Becky asked who he was, Shiloh casually replied, "Just a friend." Just then, Becky's father called, but she ignored the call. As night fell, the two decided to stay in a nearby motel. That night, they spent time talking, laughing, and sharing joyful memories, moments that helped them forget the pain, if only for a little while. Shiloh was a vlogger. She traveled to different places, capturing photos and videos, which she uploaded to YouTube. While she was at a restaurant, a waiter came to take their order. Shiloh asked him where the old 20,000 feet tall tower was. The waiter told her that it was just 2 miles from there. That night, both of them stayed at the same hotel. After the waiter left, Shiloh told Becky that the red light they could see glowing in the distance was the TV tower, and that's where they were going the next morning. Shiloh explained that although the light wasn't in use anymore, it still always stayed on at the tower. After their conversation, they both went to sleep. That night, Becky had a dream where she was having fun with Den, but suddenly she woke up. The next morning, when they woke up, they had tea and breakfast and set off toward the tower. On the way, Shiloh started recording her vlog. Both of them were busy shooting videos when suddenly a car appeared out of nowhere. Luckily, they narrowly escaped an accident. Eventually, they reached a deserted area from where the tower was visible. As they moved ahead, they saw a fenced gate blocking the path to the tower. A sign on it warned, entering could be dangerous. But ignoring the warning, both of them started walking further on foot. Shiloh began filming to capture the moment. As they went ahead, they saw an injured animal lying on the ground, with vultures circling above. They chased the vultures away. Shiloh clicked a photo of the animal and uploaded it to social media, and the image went viral instantly. Now, as they moved closer, they finally reached near the tower. Becky became frightened when she saw the tall old tower. The ladder was rusted, and the bolts were loose. Seeing this, Becky said to Shiloh, "I'm not climbing this tower," but Shiloh reassured her, saying the ladder could still hold their weight. "You have to do this for Den," she added. After Shiloh reminded her of Den and made her swear on him, Becky finally agreed to climb the tower. To ensure safety, both of them tightly secured their ropes. Because the tower was old and anything could happen at any moment, both of them started climbing up. Shiloh was ahead, and Becky was following following closely behind. Becky was climbing a higher section of the tower after Silo, so she was scared, and with good reason. The tower was rusted in many places, and some of the metal rods were broken, but Silo kept encouraging her and eventually brought her up to 1,800 feet. Above them were another 200 feet of exposed ladder, which was attached to a thick pole. Silo started climbing up the ladder and asked Becky to come along too. But the rusted ladder was so weak that as soon as both of them started climbing, several bolts loosened and fell off without their knowledge. Finally, they both reached the topmost part of the tower. Being at such a height gave them a completely different feeling. Becky scattered Din's ashes into the wind once they reached the top, which brought her some emotional relief. After that, Silo recorded some videos using her drone. Then, they got ready to climb down. They put on their harnesses and tied themselves together with a rope. Becky picked up the bag and started descending. She had only climbed down a few steps when suddenly the ladder gave way, and one by one the steps began to fall. Becky started falling down with them, and Silo almost did too, but Silo quickly grabbed onto the pole. Thanks to that quick reaction, Becky was saved from falling. Silo used all her strength to slowly pull Becky back up using the rope. Both of them breathed a sigh of relief. They had just narrowly escaped death. When they looked down again to continue climbing back, they saw a terrifying sight. Most of the ladder had broken off and fallen, leaving only a single step, and that too was far out of their reach. Their bag had landed on a box far below. After seeing all this, both of them were shaken to the core. They pulled out their phones to call for help, but luck wasn't on their side. There was no network signal. Now they didn't know how to get help from 2,000 feet above the ground. Their hearts were racing, but Silo stayed strong and told Becky that when the ladder had fallen, someone below must have heard the sound and probably already called emergency services. So someone would surely come to rescue them soon. Hearing that, Becky calmed down. While searching around the pole, they found a telescope and a flare gun. Their hopes rose again. Silo noticed that Becky's feet were injured. Silo tore off some cloth and wrapped Becky's feet. Then they both waited. Hours passed, but no one showed up to help. This made Becky realize that no one had actually heard the ladder fall. Silo checked her phone again, but still no signal. Then she typed a message asking for help on her social media app, hoping that if her followers saw the message, they would call the police. She tied the phone to a rope and lowered it down in hopes of catching a signal. But unfortunately, the phone still didn't get a signal, so the message didn't send. That's when Becky got an idea. If they could somehow get the phone safely to the ground without breaking it, maybe it would work. Hearing this, Silo took off her shoe, placed the phone inside, and wrapped it securely with cloth. She then threw the shoe down, but again, bad luck struck. The phone broke on impact, and the message was never sent. A little later, Silo used the telescope to look below and saw a man walking his dog while talking on the phone. They both shouted to him for help, but from such a great height, their voices couldn't reach him. To get his attention, they threw a shoe down at him, but the man was too focused on his phone and didn't notice the shoe falling behind him, so he turned around and started walking away. Just then, Silo noticed that the man's companion was still nearby, sitting in a car. Silo and Becky decided that they would fire the flare gun once it got dark, hoping the men would see it. As night fell, the two men started driving away in their car, but just in time, Becky fired the flare gun into the sky. Luckily, both men saw the flare and began heading toward them. Seeing this, Silo and Becky were overjoyed. The men drove up right near Becky's car. But the very next moment, the men smashed Becky's car window and stole the car, driving away with it. Watching this, Silo and Becky were devastated. Their last hope was gone. At that moment, Silo noticed Becky's tattoo, which said 143. It reminded Silo that Becky's boyfriend used to say 143 instead of I love you. Later, when Becky started watching her wedding video, she realized something was off. Silo didn't seem happy at her wedding. That's when Becky realized the truth. Silo and Den had been having an affair. When she confronted Silo about Den, Silo confessed they had been secretly together for 4 months. They had betrayed Becky behind her back, and learning this broke her even more. Silo apologized, but Becky didn't say anything. She now understood that her father was right about Den all along. That terrible night somehow passed, and by morning, both of them were hungry and thirsty. Becky then said that if they still had the drone, they could have written help and flown it down. But the problem was, the drone was in the bag that had fallen and gotten stuck on a satellite dish far below. Silo told Becky she would go down and get the bag. She started climbing down, but the rope wasn't long enough to reach the bag. So Silo made a daring jump and landed directly on the dish. Now she had the bag, but the new challenge was how to get back up to the rope. Silo took out a selfie stick from the bag, tied the bag to it, and used it to hook the rope. Then, without thinking about her own safety, she grabbed onto the bag herself. Becky helped pull Silo up as she tried to climb at the same time. Silo was just about to reach the ladder when the rope suddenly slipped from her hand. Becky feared the worst, that Silo had fallen to her death. death. But when she looked down, she was relieved to see Silo was still alive, clinging to the top of the bag hanging from the rope. Silo's hands were injured, making it even harder for her to climb. But Becky somehow managed to pull her friend up all the way. Silo and Becky had just narrowly escaped being separated forever. Becky quenched her thirst and wrote help on the drone before flying it. But luck still wasn't on their side. The drone's battery was about to die, so she had to bring it back. That night, when Becky woke up, she saw that Silo wasn't there. This made Becky very anxious. But the very next moment, she saw Silo's dead body. Just then, Becky woke up. It had all been a nightmare. Silo was still right beside her. Seeing her safe, Becky let out a sigh of relief. Then Becky noticed a light on the tower and thought, maybe we can charge the drone here. The next morning, Becky climbed the pole with the drone and somehow reached the bulb. She wrapped her clothing around the bulb and removed it, then tried to plug in the drone charger. But the plug was too small and wouldn't fit. Thinking quickly, Becky took off her ring and used it to complete the circuit in the socket, and it worked. The drone started charging, but Becky couldn't hang on to the pole much longer. Her hands and feet were going numb. As she waited for the drone to fully charge, a vulture suddenly attacked her. While trying to escape the bird, Becky's bag fell down to the ground. Still, she didn't give up and stayed hanging onto the pole. Finally, after a long wait, the drone was charged and she climbed back down. Becky and Silo sent the drone toward the hotel. The drone was getting close, but just then, it crashed into a truck on the road and shattered on impact. With the drone destroyed, Becky and Silo lost their final hope. Both of them were now severely weakened from hunger and thirst. Then Becky saw Silo's last shoe and came up with an idea. She asked for the shoe so she could type a message on her phone and lower it down, but Silo refused to give it to her. Suddenly, Silo's face was covered in blood. Becky was terrified, but then realized that Silo had already died. It had all just been a hallucination. When Becky looked down, she saw Silo's dead body lying on the box below, with vultures circling overhead. This shook her to the core. Becky was now completely alone. She had no support left. She clung to the pole throughout the night, waiting for morning to come. Thunder flashed in the sky, and she thought her final moments had arrived. So she began asking her father for forgiveness for all the mistakes she had made. Suddenly, a lightning bolt flashed, and Becky passed out in fear. The next morning, Becky was still clinging to the tower in an unconscious state. Her limbs had gone numb. Then a vulture, drawn by the scent of her wounds, approached. Becky woke up and grabbed the bird, killing it. Now Becky had food. After eating, she felt a new surge of energy. She tied the rope to the ladder and climbed down to the dish. A vulture was still there, but it flew away when Becky arrived. Then Becky typed an emergency message to her dad on her phone, placed it inside Silo's body, and pushed it off the tower. This time, Becky was lucky. The phone reached the ground without breaking, and the message was successfully delivered to her dad. He immediately set out to rescue her and alerted emergency services too. Back on the tower, the dish Becky was standing on began to break. She started screaming in fear. A little while later, Becky's father arrived at the location and saw the rescue team retrieving a body. He assumed it was Becky and believed she was gone forever. But just then, Becky came running toward him and hugged him tightly. Becky had been saved. The body in the bag was Silo's. Becky was overjoyed to be reunited with her dad. She realized what the true meaning of life was. Even though she was heartbroken over losing her best friend, she had survived. And with that, the movie ends. Thank you for watching.